Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now, decades ago it was expected that increases in processor performance would come from higher clock speeds. I recently discovered an article on AnandTech titled "The Future of Intel's Manufacturing Processes," which dates back to December 2000. I'll leave a link below because looking back on assumptions about the future from the future is always fascinating, but towards the end of the write-up are some facts from Intel. Facts supplied to AnandTech by Intel regarding the future of their CPUs by 2005. One in particular stands out to me, which reads, and I quote, "The future processors will have 400 million or more transistors, will run at 10 GHz and operate at less than 1 volt. Today's Pentium 4 processor has 42 million transistors, runs at 1.5 GHz and operates at 1.7 volts. Intel's netburst-based processors would go on to top out at 3.8 GHz, and the speedier successors to the Prescott-based Pentiums were cancelled, likely over similar concerns regarding heat and power consumption. The focus then fully shifted to multi-core processors, with 4 or higher core count CPUs now being the standard for modern PC builds. While it may be a very long time before we do get 10 GHz processors, if that's ever the case at all, the experimental past paved the way for the present, and while the days of single cores are long gone, I couldn't help but wonder what it's like to use one core in 2022. The i3-12300 here is, at the moment, one of, if not the fastest quad-core CPU available, and if we disable all but one of the cores, it will not only wipe the floor with any natural single-core CPU that's ever been released, but it'll even outdo some older multi-core processors as well. Of course, PC games would have been designed and coded very differently if the world of computers was still one-core based, but nonetheless I couldn't resist combining modern power with nostalgia, and I'm glad I did because the following results might surprise you. Realistically, you won't want to do this, it makes no sense, but it certainly was fun. The not so great news first of all. Despite the capabilities of Intel's modern Golden Cove cores, that doesn't change the fact that most of my games library crashed or didn't start altogether. Older titles like Skyrim, the original 2011 release, will run fine, as I'm sure is the case for most games of this age. At the moment we've got one core enabled and hyperthreading disabled. CSGO offered a surprising average frame rate when just a single core was enabled, though as expected the percentile lows suffered. These figures indicate some stutter and performance issues, yet it really didn't feel too bad. Quite a surprising result, honestly. That said, the real surprise came from Red Dead Redemption 2. This ran with at least 30 FPS on average, over 40 FPS in fact outside of busy towns or cities, with the same single core enabled and hyperthreading off. Venturing into Valentine absolutely decimated performance, as you might expect, but both this and the Counter-Strike result was better than expected. Next up, let me show you how things change with hyperthreading enabled. We're still using just one physical CPU core, but we are working with 2 threads or 2 logical processors here. Hyperthreading was first introduced with single core Xeons and Pentium 4s back in 2002. This time around, CSGO runs much better and doesn't really exhibit any noticeable or at least impactful frame dips. It feels fine to play for the most part with a 1% low that stays over 60 FPS. The average is over 120. Red Dead Redemption 2 is transformed thanks to hyperthreading as well. Here it is running on just one physical core at over 60 FPS with Digital Foundry's Xbox One X equivalent settings, minus the 4K resolution of course. Just like before, performance will drop when venturing into towns, but it doesn't suddenly become unplayable by any means. It dips below 30, sure, but at no point did I think, I can't play it like this. Of course I wouldn't have to, everything we're doing is just for fun, but it's nice to see how fast the individual cores can perform, especially when a game isn't really very CPU intensive, like this one. Far Cry 6? No. Just like the Celeron G6900, which uses 2 physical cores, 1 physical core and 2 logical ones, will not run this game very well. That's all there is to say. It's not enjoyable, but at least it actually started, so that's something. Every game I tried did in fact start this time around, but Cyberpunk wouldn't load, and Forza Horizon 5 froze halfway through loading. God of War ran at almost 30 FPS with 1 core and 2 threads, though it actually became pretty funny to play because certain textures didn't load and some enemies didn't spawn. At one point I was fighting this, well, I can't even tell you what it is because it never loaded properly, but we still got all the combat and kill animations, and the game looked as though it had been tweaked to run on low-end hardware, almost as if Low Spec Gamer had tried getting it to run on a GPD win or something. There's missing textures and missing things everywhere. Fortnite gave us a decent average, but the 1.1% lows were non-existent. There were freezes, frame dips and stutters. It was just like running the game on a modern Celeron. I should also mention that navigating and using Windows 10 felt fine, even with just 1 core enabled, with the occasional hitch or freeze in unexpected situations like typing too fast in Notepad. Overall, you shouldn't disable all but one CPU core, that much is obvious, but doing so gives us a proper look at how far CPU architecture has come over the years, and I certainly had fun messing around today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching as well. If you did, leave a like on it down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.